Hello, inclusive leaders. Welcome to Lead at Any Level Live. It's Monday at noon Eastern, which means it's time for Lead at Any Level Live. My name is Amy Wanninger. I'm the Inclusion Catalyst, and I'm so excited to have you with me today. We're going to get in a little bit of trouble today. We're going to cause some good trouble today. I'm really excited about it. But before I get there, before I get to today's topic, I would love to hear from you. Let me know in the comments, are you watching this live or hashtag replay? Let me know where you're watching from and what platform you're watching from, so I kind of know where people are at, because I simulcast this to Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube all at the same time, and I can't always see who's on because of the software that I use. So I would love to know where you are coming in from and how you're watching today. Before I get to today's topic, which is going to get a little spicy and I'm excited about it, I want to share with you a couple things. So the first is, let's see, last week I was out for a lot of the week because I had a conference. I was at the National Speakers Association Influence 2023 event. It was phenomenal. My heart and my brain are overflowing with gratitude and ideas and all the things. So if I saw you there, I probably hugged you. If you didn't want to hug, I'm sorry. I tried to ask everybody before I just went in for the kill, but I felt like I hugged about half of the 1,100 people that were there, and it was wonderful. And I didn't get sick, which I can't believe. So thank you. If you were at Influence this year, thank you so much for making it such an amazing experience. Not just for me, but for everyone. I heard so many times that it was just the best ever. I see Anna from LinkedIn, and I see Elliot from LinkedIn in Baltimore. Excellent. Welcome to you both. Thank you for joining. Let me share with you, a couple weeks ago, I did a webinar, and the webinar was based on my new book, which if I hold it right here, you can see it, Surviving the Labor Crisis. And this is all about the urgent case for inclusive leadership, which is something we're going to be touching on today. If you didn't get to catch it live, you can still catch the replay. Let me show you how to do that. You can either go to the link that's down here. I don't have a hand. There it is right there. bit.ly-labor-crisis-webinar. Or you can scan the QR code right up here and go right to the webinar. It's available for an on-demand replay. I was going to just leave it up for a week, but then I thought, well, that's silly. Why not just leave it up for longer? So I'm still talking about this. This is still relevant. It's still important. Unemployment is still super low. Although it's starting to inch back up in Black and brown communities, which is frustrating. But we will see how this plays out. I think that we have a long-term labor shortage. You'll find out why in the webinar. You'll find out what the causes are and what you as a leader can do about it. Not big policy things that you have no control over, but what you as a leader can do to keep your people and keep them engaged right now, to reduce turnover costs and position your company for success for the long term. So if that is of interest to you, I hope you will sign up, take the webinar on demand. I heard it was really good from the people that attended, so hopefully they were right, and I didn't just pack it with my friends. All right, so today I want to share with you something that has been weighing on me a little bit. So we're now in July, almost the end of July. Pride Month's been over for quite a while, but going into Pride Month, I had some experiences that I wasn't expecting. And for those of you who don't know, I am a member of the LGBTQIA plus community. I'm a bisexual woman. I am married to a man. Most people have no idea that I'm a member of the community because I talk about my kids and my husband, and they assume that I'm straight. Now, let me just say, if I were married to a woman and I talked about my kids and my wife, people would assume that I'm a lesbian, and they wouldn't see me for who I am in that case either. So my identity is constant, but it doesn't fluctuate based on who I'm with at the moment that you meet me. Now, hopefully I'll keep this one for the rest of my life, but we'll see. So he really is truly the love of my life. But this is an issue within the LGBTQ plus community. And what I'm finding is there are different conversations happening within our community now that the community is under attack from a lot of different areas. And I want to tell you a little bit about my experience, but I want to invite Nora Del Rosario to the screen. Hi, Nora. You're on mute if you want to unmute. Hello. Welcome.
Hello, Amy. Glad to be here.
I am so glad to have you. So Nora and I are from different places in the world, different places in the United States, We have very different lived experiences, and we are nowhere near each other in age. But we share this common experience of what I'm going to call, and this is where I might get into a little trouble, Nora, so you help me out here.
Okay.
Divide between the good gays and the problematic gays. And Nora, you experienced this.
I am definitely a problematic gay. I will say that definitely. Yeah, there's when people think about the LGBT community, there's a lot of it's obviously about inclusion and getting people a sense of belonging, but like any other subculture community, there is this set expectation of what you're doing, what you're interested in, things like that. And personally for me, I don't know about you, but I don't fit that mold necessarily. Like even on like either on a surface level or on a deeper level. Like I don't watch RuPaul's Drag Race. I don't go to pride parades. I'm not an activist either online or social media or in real life. So those activities I don't take part in. But even beyond that, on a deeper level, the big thing for me is I'm a member of the Catholic Church and I still go to mass every single week. And I have affirming church and whatnot. It's great, but it's a real turnoff for a lot of people, surprisingly. I remember just last week I was calling someone I met on a dating app. It was fine, it was good and all that. We were joking around, and I'm a trans woman, I identify as a lesbian, so I was calling with another woman. I mentioned, oh yeah, most of my friends, I meet them at church. And she's like, oh wait, you actually go to church? And we had to have a whole conversation about that for 30 minutes about her experiences with the church, and got really serious all of a sudden, despite the fact it was a very lighthearted get to know you call for the most part. And it really turned her off to an extent towards me, despite the fact that I'm just as LGBT as she was, yet even potentially even more so, yet because of this one part of it, it turned her off from me. So like in that way, yeah. The fact that I give any leeway to organizations like the Catholic Church, it makes some people look at me as like a bad gay, like you said earlier.
Problematic, not bad.
Problematic. Oh yeah, there you go. That's right. Problematic gay. There you go.
Yeah. So, I was going into Pride Month talking to different organizations about speaking for them. And one of the companies that I talked to, one of the leaders in the LGBTQ ERG, so the resource group for LGBTQ employees, said, you can come and talk to our people, but we don't want you to talk about gender or sexuality being on a continuum, because people use that against us. And I said, well, I'm a bisexual woman. I don't know how to talk about LGBTQ identities without including that aspect of my lived experience. But I also wouldn't want to erase the lived experience of so many people who live outside of gender or sexual orientation binaries, right? This is not always an on-off switch or a toggle bolt, right? There's a broad spectrum of experience here. And I don't feel like I can speak authentically without speaking to that. And I didn't get the job. And that may not have been why, but it certainly felt like why. And in another event, I was talking to a client that had already hired me, and one of their ERG leaders told me that, she felt biased against me, and that she was, uncomfortable having me speak on behalf of, or, to and from within the gay community. And I just found it really interesting that that was happening again. I experienced a lot of this, in the 90s when I first came out. It kind of wasn't an issue for a long time, although I get some of those things, kind of some of the stereotypes and some of the hurtful comments. The ones that come to me usually come from within the community, honestly, which surprises a lot of people, because I live in Indiana, and you would think that the hostility or the snide remarks I would hear would come from people that live around me locally, but it's typically not. And so, Nora, I'm wondering, like, do you feel a lot of that, being young, being a woman of color, being trans, do you feel like there's sort of a divide in like who gets to go first in terms of equality?
That's a good question. Who gets to go first in terms of equality there? I do think specifically, especially for for by people, that there is a sense that because you're not explicitly as, like rainbow, pride, gay, however, as people expect, there's not going to be that level of attraction towards having you at someone's organization. I can see that definitely. And also for myself, I see a lot of that also. Like, for example, I don't necessarily talk as much about my own coming out story being trans. I bring it up in certain situations, especially when talking to people in the community, but generally speaking, in corporate environments, I don't bring it up necessarily. I talk a lot more about generational differences and about things like how to effectively lead and manage members of the community. Yet people don't really expect that from me. They expect me to come and give an inspirational speech about coming out and being your authentic self. And I can talk about that a lot, but that's not really what I am about as a speaker, as a consultant, as a trainer, per se. And that definitely makes things difficult for me to find audiences and people who are willing to work with me.
Mhm. You know, as we talk about this, though, I want to be sure that we call out this is about bigger than just us, right? It's not just
Yeah.
about Nora, and it's not just about Nora and Amy and our experiences, right? As business owners, I want to share really quickly a comment from Angelique. Angelique says, "I'm from Indiana. It's absolutely not difficult for me to understand why people here are like that, LGBTQIA plus or not." Thank you, Angelique. I see you. And if you ever want to get together for lunch, I am here. I'm in your community. I'm in your area, and would love to chat with you. Thank you so much for weighing in. It's but it's bigger than us, right? I want to share something, if I may. This is, let me get here. This is a history of left-handedness among Americans. Now, this goes back a long way. This goes back to 1880. And the reason I share this is that for a long time, there was a certain number of people, right, prior to this, before they started collecting data, whoever the they is that started collecting the data on left-handedness. There was some period of time before people were talking about this when a certain percentage of the population, roughly stagnant, was left-handed. And then all of a sudden, being left-handed became a problem because when you went to school, you got smacked with rulers if you tried to pick up a pen or a pencil with your left hand. Kids were beaten. Kids were trained to use their right hand, even though it wasn't the way they naturally wrote or the way they naturally performed, when they would write. And so for quite a while, this was a stigmatized identity, if you will. It was a stigmatized way of being. And even people my age, and I like to think I'm not that old. I'm getting close to 50, but to me, that's not that old. We're not talking about ancient times, right? Victorian era times. I know people who, as children, were smacked with a ruler in school because they tried to write with their left hand. And then something started to happen in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and on, where we sort of stopped doing that. And we just, if a kid wanted to write with his or her or their left hand, we let them do that. And it became another way of being that was acceptable. And what happens is the number of left-handed people increases sharply and then levels off. And I believe it levels off because we were no longer smacking people for doing it. Now, the reason I say that this is bigger than us is because as we look at the way culture has shifted, particularly in the United States, if we ignore maybe the last 2 or 3 years, but up until very recently, we've seen a lot of destigmatization of LGBTQIA plus identities. We've also seen an expansion of the acronym, right? And so more people are in the club, if you will, just by virtue of the acronym expanding. But we've also seen a destigmatization. So when for decades and generations, people were forced out of their homes, alienated from their families, fired from their jobs, have their children taken away from them, all of these things, it was less likely that people are going to come out. And then over time, as folks have, as popular opinion has shifted and people have become more accepting broadly, we've seen a shift, and we've seen more people come out as LGBTQIA+. Unfortunately, this graph doesn't go back before 2012, but the numbers have been rising steadily. And if you break this down by gender, which this graph does not, or not by gender, by generation, which this graph does not, I saw a report today that as many as 20% of Gen Z people identify as being in the LGBTQIA+ community. I bring all of that up to say younger people, the future of the workforce, are increasingly identifying within these identities, or increasingly saying, you know what, gender binary just doesn't work for me. Sexual orientation is fluid for me, or, has changed or is changing, or something that I'm, learning about myself. And so, Nora, specifically as a Gen Z person, because this is fascinating to me, just the generational difference between my Gen X upbringing and your Gen Z upbringing, we're really talking about sort of a sea change in the way people understand who they are and what's acceptable and what's possible, and what boxes we do or do not need to fit into. Can you elaborate on that just a little bit?
Sure, definitely. I have a lot of experience and am friends with people from all across the generational spectrum on the LGBT community. I know a lot of older gay men, and also a lot of trans, bi, poly, pansexual people at my age. There's definitely a shift even within the community about how it's discussed and people's process in coming out. For example, a lot of the older gay men I know, their coming to terms with sexuality was like a lifelong process, and a lot of them didn't come out until 30s, 40s, after years of attempts of failed marriages, failed girlfriends, things like that, and they realize, okay, I'm gay. And for a lot of them, it's not a matter of they didn't know it or that they identify it, but they had no chance to really talk about it or share it with other people, in a sense. Whereas for younger people, especially the cohort under 25 to Gen Z, we find it's a continual exploration process that begins from a much younger age. For example, for myself, I learned about the LGBT community from a Discord community. And if you don't know what Discord is, it's a social media app primarily used by, very popular among Gen Z.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I learned a lot of things. That's where I learned about gender as a spectrum, and learned the difference between gender expression, gender identity, and assigned sex at birth. I learned all of these things from that community. I was able to discuss what my experience of gender is and gender identity is with those other people. And because of that, I managed to come out a lot earlier than other people, a lot of older folk in the LGBT community were able to, because I had that support and that open space where I could talk in a space where I'm not worried about people attacking me or just general harassment towards me for who I am. That's something very new, especially in regards to people exploring gender identity and their sexuality.
Yeah. And, as you're talking, it occurs to me too that just having the language for our experiences is very difficult if we don't hear someone speak the words, if we don't have someone who's explaining who they are, or, if we don't have role models, if you will, for talking about these things. It can be very difficult. It can be very isolating, and can be very damaging. And that's why I think so many people in our community suffer with depression, with suicidal thoughts, with suicide attempts, because it can be so isolating for so many people not to have those communities. So, Nora, as you think about the future of the workforce, from the perspective of someone who's Gen Z, what do you think people your age are looking for, both from an employer, but also from within their own community of elders, if you will, in the LGBTQ community within an employer? Because I would imagine that the needs for resource groups, or that what you would need from a resource group, would be different than what someone my age might want to give to or get from an ERG.
Right. So first of all, a lot of us aren't thinking about ERGs yet because most of us are still in college, and it's funny talking about them like, oh, I speak at ERGs, and like, what's an ERG? I remember I was networking with someone who was my graduating year in college, and I was trying to figure out if I could speak at her company, and she was telling me about her ERG she has for younger people, but she never called it an ERG. She had no idea. She was just the group for young people at my company. But that joke aside, it is very different now what Gen Z are expecting from the workforce, and not even just particularly members of the LGBT community, but also Gen Z as a whole. You talked about the stats, 20% of Gen Z identify as LGBTQIA+, which is 3 times more than the general population. However, at the same time, also a lot more of Gen Z are exposed to those members of the LGBT community, whether through social media or even their immediate friend group, the social circle. Because of that, they're much more aware and alert of that when they're looking for a place to apply for, when they're looking for, is this a place where I want to grow my career? Is this a place where I want to develop my skills and contribute to in my work? It's not just about, can I get a job here? It's about, do I belong at this place? Is my being here a part of the values here in this organization? And can I get the same kinds of opportunities and respect that a cishet allo person would be able to get? And they look for that all over the place. It's not just about whether or not they actually get the job. Like I said, they look at Glassdoor reviews. They look at their social media. What are you posting about? What does your website say? And also they'll ask for testimonials and people they know who work there, and they'll ask, what is it like for LGBT people? What do they offer? What kind of resources? What kind of support? They are much more willing to do the research and look and see if you, as an organization, as a leader, are doing the work to help us feel included.
Absolutely. And going back to the topic of the labor crisis, the growing segment of the workforce is Gen Z, and Gen Z is the most diverse generation we've ever had in this country in terms of, backgrounds, identities, ethnicities, race, just the full complement of humanity in Gen Z is so much better represented than in any other generation in the US in history. And so I think that, if you're having trouble as an organization keeping people right now, keep in mind that the future of the workforce looks just like the people that are walking out your door today. And so there's some changes that need to happen internally if you want to keep people and keep them engaged, not just now, but for the next generation. Nora, I want to thank you so much for sharing your experience with me. Is there anything that you'd like to tell people or let them know how they can find you if they're looking for a speaker for their organization and a little bit more about what you do?
Sure. I am on LinkedIn, Nora B. True. Same, also on Instagram, you can same tag, Nora that be true. Additionally, I've done a few TikToks. Also, if you want to see me speak, and have some things on my website also, which you can find on my LinkedIn. It's somewhere on my profile there. I particularly talk about generational differences and the issues of being in the transgender community. What I really try to focus on is helping people understand that you don't really need to be perfectly woke and in the know and everything, but it's more about having an open heart and mind to the needs of people who have different life experiences than you, and working on that, using it as the foundation to build your diversity inclusion initiative so that you can have a workforce that is attractive to people of all generations and all backgrounds.
Thank you so much, Nora. I appreciate you. I appreciate your time and your willingness to talk about this. And I hope that if we caused any trouble today, it was the good kind of trouble that moves the conversation forward. I want to thank the folks in the comments We had a lot of comments today, a lot of engagement today. You've got your fan club is here, Millie. It's giving you high fives and all the emojis. And so, but no, I appreciate everyone tuning in and listening to this conversation. I think it's an important one to have in your community, in your company or organization, within your ERGs. If you look around and you see people from within your community aren't being represented in your employee resource groups or in your organization, it's time to have some tough conversations about why that might be and what you can do to change the environment so that more people feel welcome, more people feel seen, and more people stick around. Because I don't know about you, but most organizations I talk to have not solved all their problems yet. We need all the talent we can get. We need all the contributions we can get to help our companies grow and thrive. Nora, thank you. Thank you to everyone in my audience. I appreciate you all. You'll want to join me this Thursday. Actually, let me find I don't even have my spreadsheet up. This Thursday for Including You. This is the interview podcast where I interview chief diversity officers and other executives about what's going well with their inclusion efforts in thank you, Angelique. Angelique and I are going to be friends, I can tell already. And this week will be an exciting episode. And I would love to tell you who it is, but I forgot to pull my spreadsheet up and I don't know. But I'm sure it's going to be great because all of the conversations I've had have been phenomenal. And if you're watching this and it's you this Thursday, I am so sorry for forgetting. But I've been in and out and I haven't watched. I know it's bad. I told you, Nora, before we started, there's professional and then there's whatever I am. And so, I got one foot in, but I'm not quite. I got the blazer, but not quite the prep. We're halfway there. We got the blazer. But anyway, this Thursday at noon Eastern, join me for Including You. And that's available right where you're watching this on LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube. And you can also enjoy it as an audio podcast if you search for Living Corporate, wherever you get your podcasts, Including You as the Friday show. I will see you all next week right here on Monday at noon Eastern for another edition of Lead at Any Level Live. Thanks. Have a great day.
Hi, everyone.